7 or 8 questions, and just
Okay.
thought we'd start with where we are now and kind of move back to your experience and then back to where we are, and if that works for you. We're trying to sort this out because we're finding, we've been talking about these issues, but especially surveillance, for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
We've done some work in Congress to try to get some Patriot Act provisions changed, and we've gone to court to challenge the NSA programs, and we've had limited success. And one of the things we run up against is, questions from, or sort of the general feeling that people have that this kind of surveillance is benign compared to surveillance states as we think of them, like East Germany, or compared to, say, times in our history like the 50s and 60s, and that this is targeted, this is specific toward terrorism, and if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about. And so one of the things we're really trying to sort out is exactly how these things intersect surveillance and free expression, and so that's sort of the turf of this brief that we're working on, and so that's sort of what these questions are about. Okay, sound good? Great. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Great. So, what was your reaction to the recent revelations about the National Security Agency's surveillance program?
A lack of surprise. I wasn't surprised at all that this thing came. I believe that government conducts this, perhaps not to the extreme that it's doing now, but it's always conducted surveillance on the rationale being it's for national security, basically. So I felt it's always going on. This is just more extreme.
And in what ways? I mean, what about these programs raises specific questions for you, and what questions do they raise? What are your concerns?
Well, the basic question is, how free are we from Big Brother, basically? How free are we to conduct our lives and our business, whatever that is, without knowing, that somebody is spying and somebody is writing it down, somebody's taking pictures, somebody is putting us into a file. That's what I'm concerned about.
And in what way do these revelations and those questions resonate with your personal experience?
Well, I was blacklisted in the 50s for 10 years, 10, 12 years, something like that, and visited frequently by the FBI, feeling, although without any specific proof, that my phone was tapped, knowing that the FBI had been around talking to the superintendent of the building about people who visited me. They examined my garbage, and they would stop me once or twice a month, usually, and either come to my house or stop me on the street, once in the subway, once when I was waiting on a bus. Always very polite, we want to talk to you, but always in effect telling you we know where you are. You're under surveillance of some kind. So that was my experience for 10 years.
How did that affect you as a writer?
Well, as a writer, my main concern was making a living. That was basically it. And of course, all the avenues I'd been working for before were closed down. A couple was not as hard, and although it was difficult for magazines, so I was able to do a couple of magazine pieces now and again. But for television or movies, which was my main thing, I couldn't get work. But the writers were luckier than the actors or directors, because they had to show their faces and we didn't. So it was a question for 10 years of finding people who would front for me, essentially, you know, and you know, uh, you couldn't be essentially selective about what you did. I mean, up to a point you could be. I mean, there were certain things you wouldn't do, but basically you went where you could find work. In my case, it was in television, and I was lucky in being a friend of a very good director named Sidney Lumet, and he hired me under the table, and that's where I did, you know, most of the work in those times.
And then what about for your colleagues who weren't blacklisted? How do you think for them the awareness that people like you were being subjected to this kind of surveillance, how did that affect them as writers?
Everybody was careful. Everybody was careful. It was not a time for risk-taking on the part of most people. And again, in my area, in television, the work was small in terms of its content. Not entirely. You know, there were writers, non-blacklisted writers who did, I don't know what you'd call them, cutting-edge things, but not political. They stayed away from politics. Mostly psychological, you know, occasionally little forays into, there were things about big businesses that were not exactly good or right. But I think there was a general feeling of you don't stick your neck out. It was a climate that was produced.
So the defenders of the new surveillance technologies and programs insist that the programs are narrowly targeted to preventing terrorist attacks, and that law-abiding citizens have nothing to fear from the fact, say, that the government has access to information about your phone calls, not the calls themselves, but who you call, how long you talk. Do you think they're right?
No, of course not. I mean, first of all, it's, if I may use the word bullshit, but, you know, it's that whole thing about, well, if you're a law-abiding citizen, you have nothing to fear. When they do things like this, they use a very wide net. One of the things that was interesting about the FBI men who would come to see me is that they would always want to know where I'm living, who I'm living with, and that went into it, really, basically. There's no such thing for them as narrowing the focus, or if you're law-abiding, you have nothing to fear. You have lots to fear on both the direct fact that they have you in their base, in their database, they know about you, basically, and it's all a warning to you, basically, also. It's a warning, you know, doesn't matter whether you're law-abiding or not. We have the power, and we have the information. And that's a terrible kind of climate to live in.
So just sort of expand on that a little bit. So why are you personally concerned about the NSA's collection of phone data?
I don't know. If I'm not concerned about that, what am I concerned about? It concerns me. I don't trust them. I don't trust the government. I think they lie. I think this whole idea of transparency is just a cloak. It's not transparent. It's not at all transparent, basically. They may tweak it a little, you know, to satisfy the media, basically. But it is a national security state, you know, which is anathema, you know, for a truly democratic state.
So how does this affect you as a writer now and in your personal life? Do you think about this when you pick up the phone? Do you think about this when you send emails?
No, I don't. At my age, which is considerable, I really don't care. You know, and I don't feel, I feel restricted in the sense that I realize that I'm politically on the left, and have always been on the left. The things that concern me that I want to write about are often about the left. And I realize, you know, they're not going to get done. It was always difficult getting them done. Now, forget about it, you know, except occasionally. So I don't, you know, I don't feel any particular self-censorship at, you know, at this point in my life.
What are some of those subjects that you feel are, that you would, that you don't feel can get done now, or that are not being?
Well, it's interesting, but you know, I think they're on the whole the same subjects that were always kind of anathema to the people who made movies. Strictly political subjects, subjects from a left-wing point of view. You know, if the movie studios felt they could make money from them, they would make them, since that's their primary goal. I mean, I'm working on a film now, or I'm writing a film now about a left-wing lawyer named Bill Kunstler, and who was involved in the Freedom Riders in the 60s, in the Chicago trial, in Attica, Wounded Knee, you know. He's a very interesting, dynamic guy, and I think he would make a very good movie. I have no hope that anybody would want to do this movie. But perhaps now, since it's easier to make films, technically, than it used to be, maybe somebody will make it, you know, and I'm writing it with a collaborator, a very good writer, named Jeremy Pixar, who wrote Bullworth, you know, and we're not holding back in what we're writing. We don't feel constrained in what we want to say. At the same time, you know, being, you know, appropriately pessimistic about whether it'll ever get done.
I hope it does. He's
Yeah.
an iconic figure from my childhood.
Yeah.
Sure, I remember the American Indian movement.
Yeah, he was quite a guy.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what does the McCarthy era teach us about the dangers of government intrusion into writers' private affairs? What should we have learned?
Oh God, what do we learn? I don't know. I sometimes feel that the only thing we learn is how to predict our mistakes, and I think basically you learn the importance of being true to yourself, really, to what you believe in, you know, and retaining, you know, as much as you can, the ability to fight for what you believe in. And I don't think there's anything more specific. There'll always come along, you know, a demagogue like McCarthy, or a right-wing asshole like Ted Cruz, you know, and who'll make a lot of noise and make a lot of damage. There'll always be people like that, you know, and you have to recognize them, and you have to try to join up with other people. I think that's very important, really, not to be isolated. And because the power is always on the other side, really. They have the power, you know, and you're fighting the power. And that's what's interesting about Kunstler, for example. That was at the end of his career, after having participated in all these crusades, whatever they were, he was defending people like John Gotti and what's his name, Larry Davis, who shot 6 cops or something like that. And his feeling was that I'm defending them against the power. That was, you know, and I think that's important.
Last question. Do you think it's reasonable, I mean, obviously growing from your experience when you hear about NSA surveillance, it raises a lot of personal memories and questions. Do you think it's, do you think it's reasonable for writers to think that they're being monitored now, and do you think that has an impact on them?
I think it is reasonable to feel that they are in some way under surveillance, or even if it's not directly against them. How it affects them, I don't know. Depends on who the writer is and what he wants to do. It's not a healthy atmosphere, certainly. It's not an atmosphere that helps create creativity, basically, or letting the mind run free. You're always in the danger of self-censorship, of saying, no, I won't try this because I know it's not going to get done, or it'll alienate the government or something like that. So it's also in creating the climate, really, that it's bad, and the effect on writers is subtle. It's not direct particularly, but it's there.
Do you think it's more present now than it was 10 years ago?
Oh yes, I think it is. I think it is. I think it is. Well, we've been a country where, at the first sight of a foreign enemy, particularly, we go right into an abrogation of civil liberties and whatever. It used to be communism that caused that. It was always socialism in one form or another. Really, now it's terrorism. And in the name of national security, great crimes are committed.
That's great. Thank you very
All
much.
right.
It's wonderful. Did you have anything to add?
No, not, just good luck with this, and you just have to keep doing things like that. You just have, and it's so easy to get, what is this? There's a great quote from Gramsci, what's necessary is pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will, really. And that's what you need, really. You can't be a fool about what's going on, basically at the same time. You need that will. You need to preserve that. You need to nourish it. And, yeah.
It's inspiring to be with somebody who's done that your whole life. It's amazing.
Oh.
It's really great. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for this. We're going to be doing things through the fall. One of the things that we're going to do is in November, on November 14th, we're pulling together about 40 people from civil liberties field, from writers, technology people, social sciences people, to spend a day really exploring the question of how exactly surveillance impacts creativity. I think it's really important to look at that mechanism more closely, especially because I don't see, as you say, these things are proliferating, they're getting much more subtle.
Do you know, excuse me, do you know James Seamus?
No.
Who he is? He's a fascinating man. He's the head of Focus Features.
Okay.
He's also a screenwriter. He has written, I don't know, I think he's won a couple of Oscars with Ang Lee. He also teaches at Columbia.
Okay.
He's a very left-wing guy at the same time. Very, very smart. As a matter of fact, I was saying we just went to a screening of a picture of his. It's not out yet, called Closed Circuit, which is about takes place in London, but it's about terrorism, and it's about surveillance, and it's about the shittiness and the murderousness of the government. Excuse me. Just waited anyway.
Yeah, that was perfect timing.
Hello. Hi. Are you home? I'm in the middle. Evicted from her apartment.
No.
It was a sublet, and the people sold the apartment, so she's going a bit crazy trying to find something she can afford. It's very tough.
That's awful.
It's very tough. Anyway, Seamus would be somebody very smart, very good, very good guy, and very articulate, and I think he would be important, really, in a way. It's very rare you get somebody in his level of eminence, really, who's like that. And, okay, yeah, follow up on him.